Hey friends, this is Joseph Maynor. So what I want to do in this video is I want to kind of examine a thesis that I've been considering lately, that when we talk about the marriage between the human and the divine, there's no hierarchy in a marriage. That's why it's a marriage. There's no hierarchy. It's like the paradox between the full cup and the empty cup. There's no hierarchy between the two. They're married to each other. So, spirituality is just as much in service of the human as the human is in service of the divine. One of the ways to see this, and I've been having a lot of these kind of insights the last couple of days, is think about how much spirituality serves relationships, finances, and health, which are basically the human. I mean, spirituality in a way is a form of social glue, just like politics or sports or music or chess or anything like that. It's also a way to make money. I mean, look at these spiritual teachers out there that are selling books, courses, and also hope. They're selling hope, which feeds into, right, a person's desire to be happy. But then does spirituality take the place of human happiness entirely? Oh, wait until you find out that that's not the case. Because if your relationships, your finances, or your health go sideways, spirituality is not going to be enough to keep you happy. I'm going to tell you from my own experience. So does this mean that spirituality is entirely hinged to or subordinate? Well, is it subordinate to the human? No, because that wouldn't be a marriage either. That would be putting the human over the divine. And the error would be putting the divine over the human. So this has all kinds of ramifications. One of them is this idea that, well, you got to get your human stuff handled before you can get your divine handled or your spirituality handled. No, because again, that's impliedly assuming that there's a hierarchy where spirituality is over the human. You know, I think one of the ways you can kind of deconstruct this duality is ask yourself this question. In what way is spirituality a cope for the human or a supplement to the human? So why did you really get into spirituality? Maybe it was because you saw that it was an easy way to make money, right? Because you can sell people the hope that one day they will become spiritually enlightened. It will solve all their problems. You put people on a treadmill that way. You can make a lot of money. But that's dealing in magic, right? Because hope is a form of magic, a form of imagination. One day you will get something. But it's still human happiness that you're seeking, right? Yes, divine happiness sounds good in theory, and you can achieve that. I know what that is. But divine happiness is more like peace than human happiness. I mean, if somebody put you in a torture chamber, I don't care how much divine peace you have, you're still going to hate your life and probably want to kill yourself. So to think that spirituality is above the human, I think is a mistake. This is why I think, it's better to think at a higher level. Now, obviously, you're going to have to go through stages where you do believe that, and you're going to have to do that as part of your developmental process. But for me, stage teal, which is the stage above coral, these are two of my extended stages, begins to see the marriage between the human and the divine. How really they're parallel. The divine is not over the human. We tend to think, well, God is over man. Even Spinoza thought God is over man, right? Even Advaita Vedanta thinks that consciousness is over the human. You're going to have to go through those. But I'm going to tell you right now, those are, not really, they're kind of limited. You can achieve more awakening and more understanding when you realize, no, that's kind of a false duality and a false hierarchization. Those are labels that the mind takes to superimpose on reality, because the divine or spirituality is a way to connect. It's a form of social glue. So therefore, it's about relationships. You spend all your time on a spirituality forum. Why are you doing that, right? Because you want relationship. The spirituality is just the social glue that allows relationship to happen. Or let's say that you own the spiritual community. Well, why are you doing that? Because you're concerned with finances and relationship. Right? You're making money. You're the only person who's really not doing it for fun. Because for you, it's a business. So for you, yeah, spiritual truth and God, those have to be, right, over the human, or else your marketing proposition is not going to make sense. But I don't think that has to be, once you've established yourself, right, as a teacher, I don't know, maybe I'm talking out of my ass because I'm not doing this as a profession, but I'm just thinking, like, once you establish yourself as a spiritual teacher, you can kind of swing back into a more integrous perspective and say that really spirituality is just another feather in the cap. And there's a lot of feathers in the cap. And I think it's, just like Derrida, when he talked about deconstruction, what he would do is he would take an opposition like the big versus the small, and he would flip it around. So we tend to put the masculine side of an opposition first. It's like big, small, true, false, strong, weak. He would flip the duality around and put the feminine side first. So small, big, false, true, man, God, human, divine. So that the weaker side of the duality, which is usually put lower down in the hierarchy, is emphasized. And I think that we can perform this kind of deconstruction on spirituality where we can look at the human versus divine duality. And instead of putting divine over the human, we can put the human over the divine just as a matter of recontextualization. So in other words, we can think of spirituality as a way to cope with being a human. Instead of thinking of the human as some kind of a false version of oneself, and then when one becomes spiritually enlightened or awake, they can take the divine over the human. That's the proposition of spirituality for a lot of people. I think it's useful. You have to go through that on the path. So when you're talking about spiral stages, be careful of hierarchy, because you can flip the spiral entirely around, because everything that's here is okay to be here. Like, you're okay to be here regardless of what kind of philosophy you have, regardless of what kind of suffering you're going through, regardless of what kind of community you have. Your experience is still here no matter what. And I think this is where you do start to have the kinds of Zen realizations that, these are talking, are mouthing off, is a house of cards that comes crashing down when we have problems with relationships, health, and finances. And actually, you can become very wrong if you hitch your financial wagon to spirituality. because then it has to be true, of course, right? You have to have truth and you have to have God. That's your sales proposition, because you got to write that book, sell those books. You got to get those people to pay for your retreat, your seminar. You're going to be debating with other people who are doing the same game. They're playing the same game. But let me ask you a question. When you're lonely and your relationships are crap and your finances are crap and your health is crap, do you really give a fuck about what truth is or what God is? Those sound like lofty, abstract, partially bullshit things, to be blunt. Now, I've had all the not all, but I've had many of the realizations on the path, the divine. I've, had a lot of divine realizations, and, I've been that guy who's like, I'm awareness, I'm at constant peace and so on. Yeah, that's easy to say when your human is going okay, right? So let's say that you have a bunch of money for some reason. You're fortunate enough to have some relationships. Your health is still pretty good. The only reason why you can live in that kind of fantasy world is because your human is going okay. But wait until your human goes down for some reason. Like your girlfriend breaks up with you, you lose your job. All of a sudden you have like a new health condition or something like that, and you're feeling bad more than you're feeling good. How much is your spirituality going to help you now? You're going to realize that it's not going to really help you that much. And the hope that was put out there initially was that when I become spiritually enlightened, I will have these great things like truth, God, happiness, peace, love. Yeah, right? That's hope. See? That's fantasy. Until you actually are on the path for a long time. So I've been on the path now, with this work for at least 10 years, like heavily. Since 2014, I think, is when I discovered actualize.org and started doing, I was doing self-help work before that, but that's, when I started taking psychedelics and really working on spirituality, spiritual enlightenment, and so on. And I went through the whole spiritual ego thing, cycled back out of it, cycled back into it, cycled out of it. I've been fortunate in health, finances, and relationships. I've had those up, and then recently, I'm not saying that they're ridiculously low, but I've had some struggles recently with regard to relationships, finances, and health. Nothing major, but enough to make me go, all right, if spiritual enlightenment or the divine was really higher than the human, I shouldn't be suffering, right? But I am. And that's when, lately a lot of my videos have been about the marriage between the human and the divine. Instead of thinking of the divine as being over the human or the human as being over the divine, it's to put them in a paradoxical link where they're lateral, they're side by side. And in so doing, I'm kind of naturally doing a Derridian a la Derrida deconstruction with regard to spirituality, and how this idea that spirituality sits up over the human is a form of power, and it only benefits the imagination and somebody else's wallet. Because spirituality or the divine does not sit over the human. That's a thought. That's an assumption. And that doesn't benefit you unless that's your job. If that's your job, then of course it benefits you, right? That's your job. Your sales proposition is spirituality is a solution to problems of the human. Well, I wouldn't really say it's a solution to, it's more like a complement to the human. But I would also say that to say that, oh no, spirituality doesn't have a place at all. Man, honestly, I got to tell you that people who have it really rough are people who have problems with health, finances, and relationship who don't have any kind of spirituality. Those people have it really rough. So yeah, spirituality, it doesn't deliver what it promises to deliver, but it's still better than nothing, right? It's still better than nothing. Because you can always sort of reconnoiter with your spirituality when you're going through tough times. And it can help you like sustain those tough times. Okay, friends, I'm going to take a break. I'll come back and we'll do the last half of this video. Just give me 1 second. All right, friends, welcome back. So let's deconstruct two more dualities here. Namely, the truth versus magic duality and the God versus devil duality. So we tend to think that truth sits hierarchically above magic or the imagination. But actually, if you flip that duality around, where you put magic above truth, you can do a deconstruction. And actually, you can see that magic and truth, they actually have a marriage to each other. There's a little bit of magic in truth, and there's a little bit of truth in magic. So, truth can be turned into magic. And the reason why is because truth is very sneaky. There's a hope that's associated with truth. But that hope is magic or the imagination. But see, there's a kernel of truth in truth too. So for example, I have X amount of dollars in my bank account right now. It is, let's see, what's the temperature? It's 58 degrees right now, right where I'm sitting. I'm just looking at my thermometer. That's true, right? But is my spirituality true for you? Right? That seems to be like, you're selling me some snake oil there, right? So that's magic being framed as truth. So deconstruction, Derrida's way of deconstructing dualities by flipping them around and then finding the link also is what Taoism is. Like if you've ever looked at a yin-yang symbol, there's a black dot in the white half, and then there's a white dot in the black half, showing that there is no real clear dichotomy between truth and magic, or God and the devil, or good and evil, right? To assume that there is, you're assuming a physical analogy. So for example, one pen sits higher than another pen, right? From this particular vantage point. Well, you're assuming that kind of spatial analogy applies to terms. Derrida was focused on terms. You can also think in terms of concepts. But when you think about it, like when you really think about truth, you realize that you can't, in order to put the true over the false, you have to sustain that. It's a power move. And Derrida called this ethnocentrism and logocentrism. But the problem with this power move is that it's a house of cards. And it serves one particular system, but it doesn't benefit all systems. It serves the system that is using this power move for its own survival. And one of the ways that you can see this is when you look at it, who's benefiting from truth or God, right? Are you benefiting from it? Like when you're in your darkest hour, right? Is that person's truth coming to save you? Truth and God, right? These have to be the two most hope-filled, partially vacuous terms. Love, let's add love in there. Love, happiness. I can give these to you. You just follow me. You build a tribe. You keep the carrot out there. You get people to chase the carrot while you sell your products to them, right? Or you sell your videos to them, or whatever it is, right? You're the only one who's not doing it for fun, because you have a financial interest in what you're doing. Now let's look at the God versus devil duality. This one's going to offend some of you, like religious people. You can apply the same kind of analysis to this one. Let's put the devil over God and realize that a lot of the time, God is used to conceal the devil. And notice that people who cling to truth or God, they want to put the false and the devil in the shadow. But see, that they're doing that to elevate themselves, to white knight themselves, so that you place your faith in them, that they're going to deliver these good things to you. So they're operating on magic, namely in the form of hope. Right? They're selling you kind of like, a solution to problems of the human. So basically the sales proposition is that the divine can solve the human. The divine can solve the human. But really when you look at it, it's like, no, the divine is being used by the human, right? Not entirely, but you can deconstruct it this way. Somebody's making money off of it. People are using it as social glue, so they're solving their relationship needs by having something to talk about with somebody. Have you ever noticed how lonely it is in life not to have something to talk about with people? So you have to have an in. And that can be spirituality. And it can also be your need to elevate yourself as a teacher. I've seen this too. Does that mean that and you look at these people that are spiritual teachers and you see them in their worst moments and you realize this person's just a human like everybody else. You see them sitting on their pedestal with flowers around them, performing their little show. And then after, that show is over, it's okay, now we're going back to being the human, of course. But why are we putting on the show, right? It seems to me that you wouldn't need the show. What's the show for? Right? The show is magic. See? So it's like magic being disguised as truth, the devil being disguised as God. Because there's a little bit of the devil in God, a little bit of God in the devil. And so you get to this point where you start all these, just like as Derrida was concerned with, all these bright line dualities and hierarchies start to collapse. And you start to realize just how much of a power game this use of terminology actually is. But you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I mean, obviously we do want to preserve hope. And I made a video on this. I've made a couple of videos on hope, but I think in this one, what I want to say is hope is important, but I think to become awareness of to have awareness of what hope is. Hope is a form of imagination. And that can be bad, it can be good. Like, so for example, if you're trying to improve your life in some way, hope can be bad, it can be good. If you think you're going to improve your human life 100% using spirituality, I think that's an unfounded hope. But earlier on in the path, you need to go through that, right? For me to tell you these things, it's like if you haven't gone through this work like I have over the past 10 years, you may listen to me and go, man, this is a downer. This is a bummer. No, it's not a bummer. Because the path is what's important, not any kind of conclusion. I just happen to be at a place right now in my life where this is what I'm talking about. If you were talking to me a year ago when I was studying the shit out of Advaita Vedanta, I would have been the guy telling you, I'm at peace, I'm consciousness, because I was reintegrating that. I kind of re-brainwashed myself with that kind of philosophy. And it felt good for a little while, but then it dropped away too. It fell away like a house of cards. See, if something is true, then you would think that it would stick all the time, right? The only thing that seems to be true is your awareness of the process of your life. That doesn't seem to change. The content, though, even the spiritual content, the words, all that stuff, it's true, but it's a state. It's not permanent. What's permanent is awareness, but awareness doesn't speak. And one of the real insights that I've had recently, just as Derrida, Foucault talked about, actually I'll be making my second video on philosophy 2, the correspondence theory of truth declined. The correspondence theory of truth line declined, which will be on the postmodern philosophers. See, what the postmodern philosophers were well aware of is this issue of hierarchization in modernity, placing one thing over another and kind of believing in that. And that's useful like when you're a kid and you're going to school, right? I mean, they got to teach you something at some point. You can't just be entirely relative while you're going to school, right? But once you become a grown-up, and I would say like past being a grown-up, like once you hit your like 40s maybe, I think it's important to realize the artificiality of these hierarchizations too, and incompleteness. So when you put truth over the imagination or truth over fantasy, you're assuming that there's a bright line distinction between those two things. But then you start to realize, wait a minute, think of all the truth nonsense that's been sold to you that has really just been a form of fantasy. Same thing with God. You put God over the devil. But think of all the ways that like the God fantasy has been a kind of sneaky way for the devil to operate. Cloaking itself in one thing, privileging that over another, enforcing that duality, taking a hardline approach, selling people the hope that they can gain an ideal, namely truth, God, love, happiness, by following you. And then there are going to be people who said that they did do that, right? So it's like confirmation bias. I mean, maybe it did. Maybe it worked for certain people. I'm telling you, it didn't work for me sustainably. And I think you'll get to the point where you have a marriage between the mind and embodiment, where you don't throw your ideas out. It's like Zen, but you hold them lighter. So you don't go so far as to be like Derrida, where you're like, well, I can't tell you what love is, blah, blah, blah. That's kind of a form of philosophy too. That's a form of inverted hierarchization. You're placing the link over the node. You're placing the feminine over the masculine. I think a more honest approach would be, no, I have some thoughts regarding good and evil, true and false, God versus the devil. But I also realize too that there's a little bit of magic in those distinctions too. And there's a lot of partiality there. And I can moderate my hope that getting these distinctions ordered rightly is going to solve my life's problems, especially regarding relationships, finances, and health. And there's a balancing between the full cup and the empty cup here. See, if you take the empty cup over the full cup, that's another kind of hierarchization. That's just as bad as taking the full cup over the empty cup. Ditto for taking the human over the divine. That's another inverted hierarchization. That's no good either. See, you got to be able to recognize that, yes, distinctions are being made here, but my awareness that's here is more than just a hope that getting these distinctions right is going to solve all of my problems. No, you're trying to solve your human problems by getting these distinctions right, but it's not working. Why is it not working? Because it's a house of cards, in part. Okay, friends? I'll talk to you soon. Take care.